I get the feeling that this is a destination book and that everything else from Maggie O'Farrell I'm going to read is going to be a disappointment in comparison. Maggie O'Farrell's last novel, Hamnet, was one of the biggest books of 2020. It won the Woman's Prize for Fiction, it won the Booktube Prize, it was shortlisted for the Walter Scott Prize, and some of Booktube's most curmudgeonly reviewers gave it 5 stars. It created a stir. Hamnet is an example of a good writer figuring out how to be a great writer. And this is Maggie O'Farrell's follow-up novel. The marriage portrait begins with a historical note. In 1560, 15-year-old Lucrezia di Camino di Medici left Florence to begin her married life with Alfonso II di Este, Duke of Ferrara. Later that year, she would be dead. The official cause of her death was given as putrid fever, but it was rumoured that she had been murdered by her husband. O'Farrell gives us this historical note before we begin the book itself. It's a really interesting technique. She is telling us how the book ends, and you can't help but wonder, won't that take the tension out of the plot? And surprisingly, the answer is it doesn't. It raises more questions than it answers. Did he actually kill her? What were his motives? Who was she? Did she escape? What were the consequences of this murder? Did he get away with it? Actually, you're not asking that last question for very long. One of the many points of this novel is that he will get away with it. You're in no doubt of that. There is a non-linear narrative. Each chapter takes place at a different point in time, yet they all seem to converge on the opening chapter when our young Duchess realizes that her fine Duke is planning on murdering her. I love the way O'Farrell builds tension. She makes a point of telling you it's cold in chapter 1, that there is snow on the ground, that it is winter when Alfonso intends to murder Lucrezia. And as we go through the other chapters, O'Farrell casually lets you know the weather, that it's hot, it's summer, now there's a storm, the weather is changing, it's autumn, the first frosts are here, and any safety you feel for Lucrezia is slowly stripped back. The weather is the clock, and winter marks her demise. Plot-wise, this is a really satisfying novel. The book grips. You are invested. You want to know how it ends. And that's kind of frustrating because O'Farrell takes a while to get everything in position behind the scenes. And you just want to tell her to hurry up and get to the conclusion. But actually, you don't want her to hurry up because this book is written with O'Farrell's customary poetic prose that we saw on display in Hamnet. And you're torn. Do you savour the writing or do you devour the plot? O'Farrell could make a shopping list have correct rhythm and metre. But it's the characters that O'Farrell has excelled. They sing in tandem with the themes. This is a fundamentally feminist novel. Lucrezia is 15 years old with an interest in animals and art, who is forced to submit to the will of the men in her life, and O'Farrell instills her with something special. She's touched the fur of a tigress. She has scaled a mountain range to be here. Take that, darkness. Lucrezia has an inner determination, an inner grit. She is also effortlessly intelligent, answering questions her older siblings couldn't when their tutor quizzes them on events in the Trojan War. The creation of Alfonso is, for me, the cream of the novel. He has that charm that makes Lucrezia feel really good, to feel love. He gets that she loves animals, and he gives her a massive portrait of a stone marten, something Lucrezia loves, despite it being a very unusual gift. Yet he is far from the perfect husband. He intentionally withholds information from Lucrezia, and there's an ominous warning from his sister. You have no idea what he is capable of. I love this warning. It happens in the opening chapters. but you learn that Alfonso has 3 sisters, and you don't know which one said it. You don't know if it was a threat, a warning, casual conversation, or a promise to destroy her enemies. And it places all the conversations with Lucrezia and Alfonso's sisters in doubt. What is the subtext? Who is trustworthy? Who is playing a game? O'Farrell is showing us an abusive marriage with Alfonso, but abuse doesn't have to mean violence. It is the way Alfonso loves yet manipulates and controls Lucrezia, the ups and the downs, the uncertainty that she is placed in by his moods, the comparison between her marriage and that of her parents. This is just one of the examples why I think this book is deeply and fundamentally feminist, and a feminist novel with a good plot, nicely written and interesting historical characters is exactly what O'Farrell fans will be hoping for. But there are other themes too. There is an undercurrent of class and how they interact with nobility, as demonstrated by characters such as Sophia the wet nurse, Amelia the handmaid, and Jacopo the painter. We have discussed the marriage. Let us discuss the portrait. I know the title is referring to a specific piece of art in the book, but art plays such an important part of this novel. Lucrezia loves drawing and painting, yet she is not allowed to study them until she turns 10. And it seems like at every corner of this book, Lucrezia's desire to draw or paint is blocked. But when her art is seen, it is praised. It is mistaken for her tutor's work. It is clearly exceptional, but O'Farrell doesn't make her unrivaled. There is Jacopo, who is essentially an owned slave. He is an artist apprentice and paints most of the artist's work himself, only to have his boss take the credit. It is very clear that the underclasses don't get to be artists, and the underclasses very much include women. Yet the underclasses still paint. They still create art. It's awesome. Is O'Farrell making a point about the different classes, or is she making a point about art? I will leave that question to you to answer when you read the book. Good historical fiction writing needs to balance historical accuracy with making an engaging novel. O'Farrell does this by simply taking examples of the lives of women at the time and combining them into Lucrezia's narrative. Accounts of Isabel, Lucrezia's sister's life, have been added to Lucrezia's narrative to make this a great book. When I review books I love, I often feel like I've told you too much, but there is so much more to this novel that I haven't mentioned. It really is a rich text, which is ultimately and importantly very enjoyable to read. It is fun, it is gripping, and it is tense. Hamnet was always going to be a tough book to follow, but Maggie O'Farrell has done more than adequately in The Marriage Portrait. And if I'm honest, I enjoyed The Marriage Portrait more. This is a must-read for fans of historical fiction, for fans of Maggie O'Farrell, for feminists, and for people who just like good books. I loved this book, and there is no option but to give this book 5 stars.